Hello everyone, and I do have a couple of slides to start the discussion off with, but I have to admit I am not a stand on the stage keynote kind of gal. So I would love questions throughout the presentation, questions about venture investing, questions about corporate venture, questions about life-work balance, questions about Donald Trump, which I found fascinating. Anything you want to ask me, I'll do my best to answer. To start with, I thought we'd go right into, I think I'm the first of several people through the day who are going to talk about venture investing, specifically corporate venture arms, and I thought I'd start with a little bit of a background. It's not going to be a surprise to anyone that the volume of venture investing over the last 6-7 years since 2008, both in terms of dollars invested and numbers of deals done, has grown dramatically. What might be of more interest to you is the fact that corporate venture investing has grown similarly, so that in 2015, of the $60 billion invested in 4,500 deals, you can see that 7.6 billion of it came from corporate venture arms, representing about 905 of those deals, or about 20% of the total. That's up from 2014, both in terms of overall dollars and in terms of overall deals. And what we find particularly interesting is you can see the number of active corporate VCs has jumped dramatically as well, adding almost 20 just last year. This is the list of the top 10 according to CB Insights. Comcast is proud to be number 5 on that list. I do have an honorary mention of In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA's venture arm. They do some fascinating stuff, including Recorded Future, which what I'm told is real-time security threats. I'd like to know more about that. So you could ask yourself, why this activity? Why this jump in activity? Why do companies like Google, like Intel, like Comcast have a corporate venture arm in the first place? I think that there are 3 main reasons. One is, of course, we do it for the same reasons that institutional funds do it. We want to invest in high growth companies and hopefully make a little money in the process. But there are 2 other, and in our case, and here, I have to admit, I think this is probably true for most corporate venture arms out there, but the more I dive into, the corporate piece of this conversation, I'm going to confess it's really specific to the way Comcast looks at it, so I don't want to be up here necessarily representing the entire body of corporate venture. But for us, and I believe it's true for many of the others, it does provide, frankly, more R&D, the opportunity to gain access to talent, to trends, and to insights. There was a recent article which I found really interesting by a woman, Rita Waite, who I don't know, at Juniper Networks, but she sort of outlined the difference between institutional venture and corporate venture, and I think she nailed a lot of the differences and distinctions. Couple of quotes from people who, are active in corporate venture investing. From the Google Ventures perspective, this is Google's effort to take advantage of our resources to support innovation and encourage promising new technology companies. What was interesting, just in the last week or so, there was announcements that both 7-Eleven and JetBlue had started venture arms. And here's the quote from Bonnie, who's heading up the JetBlue Technology Ventures. We will be casting a wide net to find technologies across the travel spectrum that further the award-winning customer-focused experience we are known for. So just by, again, I haven't had a personal conversation with him, but just by reading the quote, I'm thinking that 2 and 3 are as important to JetBlue as 1 there. And then finally, I've said, corporate venture is one way, it's not the only way, that we look to solve the innovator's dilemma. I think we have increasingly felt that it is tough to keep pace with change in a world that is changing as fast as it is today. And certainly one way to sort of keep your sort of finger on the pulse of that change is to be having conversations on a regular basis with startups and entrepreneurs and understanding from them what they see is cutting edge, both in terms of technology, customer service, et cetera. You could also ask why corporate venture from the other side of the coin. Why would a startup, and I'm assuming many of you in here today are entrepreneurs, why would a startup look to or be interested in corporate venture and in funding from a corporation? And again, I think there are 3 principal reasons. One, of course, is, particularly if you are investing or if you are looking to grow in a category that corporation makes a business, in that corporation's industry, there's certainly unparalleled in-depth industry knowledge and also the possibility for support from that company. So, when we look at a company to invest, and we'll get into this more in a couple of slides, clearly our first lens is, like an institutional fund, financial. We're looking to invest in high growth companies with the potential for venture returns. But as soon as we can check that box, the next question we ask ourselves is, how can we add value to that company by leveraging our platform and providing strategic support? So it really is one and the same thing, right? We're looking to be a part of a high growth story, but we also think we can contribute to that high growth story by leveraging who we are. The second, of course, is access to potential customers. The company itself could be a potential customer, which is always a nice thing. If you're getting started in an industry and you've got your eyes on the company who's investing you, it gives your startup a certain legitimacy, I think, if you can put on the slide that your first customer is a large customer like Comcast. And then there's financial flexibility, and I want to talk about this a little bit. For those of us who've been in venture for a while, and Comcast, we launched our venture arm in 1999. So we've actually continued to fund through, several cycles of bubble and burst. We argue that we have an advantage in that we have only one LP. So we're not looking, we're not going outside to raise funds. And there's, a certain, there's a certain confidence or comfort in knowing that your LP is not going to go away in trying times. So I would argue if you look at our history of funding, we have a really strong history of supporting our portfolio companies, through good times and bad. I will admit, I've been at Comcast a long time. I'm almost embarrassed to admit that I've been there 25 years, which is probably more than some of you have lived. But I've only joined the venture arm about 4 years ago. And I found it interesting that when I did join, that historically there have been some sort of weird pockets of belief that somehow corporate venture wasn't as good, as institutional venture. And I'm sure there may have been reasons for that. And I would imagine those reasons came from the fact that maybe, 5, 10 years ago when corporate venture arms were first emerging, some of them were more strategic and some of them sort of came and went and weren't necessarily around during tough times. So again, I'll confess that if you Google corporate venture, one of the things you'll find right up there in the search results is a quote from our friend Fred Wilson, who says corporate venture sucks. Now, God bless Fred, he did come out several days after that particular quote and apologized and admitted that not all corporate venture sucks. Fortunately for us, we were listed among the teams that didn't suck, which was good to hear. But the reason I bring this up is I think it's changed. I really do think it's changed. I think that as corporations like a Google or an Intel or a Comcast, we are people who've made a long-term sort of 10, 15-year, even longer, I think, in terms of Intel, commitment to funding startups for all the reasons that I've just walked through. And I think that you will find, if you poll people in the market, including Fred, that our standards and our commitment to startups and to founders are really equivalent to the best of the institutional funds. Plus, I would add that as I alluded to before, we do have that strategic oomph that we can add to the recipe, to the pie, so to speak, in an effort to jumpstart growth. So now we really are sort of going to drill down. Are there any questions? I really did want feedback here. Yes, sir? Sure. Especially as the next couple of slides are pretty much a Comcast Ventures commercial. So before we get to the commercial.
Much like regular investors, I'm sure there's things to look out for from corporate venture funds, right? There's good funds, as the ones you mentioned that Fred talked about, and some particularly toxic funds that have interesting deal structures. What are maybe the top 3 things that you would recommend to look for when deciding on either which corporate venture fund to work with or whether or not you should work with a corporate venture fund?
First of all, I'm going to say that we've only had success with other corporate venture arms. So if you asked me to identify one that I didn't like, I couldn't, and I'd point you to Fred. But I think you need to look at. I think structure is important. So moving into the Comcast Commercial, we are a separate arm from the the business development and the M&A group. We are our own separate team. We are pretty autonomous we are very autonomous, not pretty autonomous. We are very autonomous in terms of our investment decisions and our investment making. We do apply that financial lens first, just like any institutional fund. We make no promises going into an investment, but then once we're in an investment, we work hard to make introductions and support. So I would look for that kind of structure where you're not necessarily dependent on a business unit, or the approval or the vote of a business unit to invest, because that may or may not slow things down. And I would also look for a history or a tradition of providing the support that's promised, of delivering on the promise. And that's easy to do just by looking at the portfolio and making some phone calls to the founders that are in the portfolio and diligencing that relationship, whether or not the relationship has proved out. Okay? Anybody else? Some in the back there.
Yeah, can I just ask, in working with your portfolio companies, if there's one or two things that you can point to that the companies themselves find most difficult about working with you, and what you find most difficult about working with them?
What most difficult about probably most difficult about I'm not sure that there's anything more difficult. I like to believe that we operate both in terms of our process and our relationships pretty much the same way a top institutional fund operates. So, and that gets down to the terms that we ask for and invest on. We're mindful that this is a fast-moving business and that we have to react quickly, which is why we protect our autonomy, and sort of separate ourselves from the rest of the larger, slower-moving sort of corporate battleship. I think that for the most part, any issues somebody has with us are pretty much similar to an issue they might have with a typical, regular institutional fund. Sometimes it may take more time and more cycles to make those introductions and get those relationships up and going. But in our case, we're very, very, very focused on delivering on that promise because we know that's what differentiates us and that's what makes our brand. And so I would hope that for the most part, people would be happy with the support that we provide them. But I'm sure there are cases where it didn't come as quickly as somebody might have hoped for. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay. Oh, sure.
Hello, Laura Day. Thank
Hi.
you so much. So you mentioned Intel Capital a couple of times. My question relates to diversity and inclusion in tech. So Intel has just announced they've launched a diversity-focused area, and I was wondering how kind of your thoughts that if Comcast is going to be adopting a similar thing, looking for female founders or founders from minorities, and just wanted to get your take on that.
Well, I'm proud to say that at least as far as minority founders, we were ahead of Intel. So,
Fantastic. Good.
Let's see, I'll skip ahead. Well, we'll get to it in a second, but in 2011, we created a fund called the Catalyst Fund, which is devoted to supporting minority entrepreneurs. For good or for bad, women are not included in that definition. But I think if you look at our portfolio, you'll find that we have supported a number of women as well. And last year we did probably 3 or 4 Catalyst deals. Okay. Let's see. So I think we've covered most of this. You can see, again, this is me drilling down to the Comcast Commercial. Our focus is understandably media, but also consumer, enterprise, and infrastructure. I've mentioned we sort of start where the typical institutional fund starts, but we definitely look at all of our deals in terms of the strategic support that we can provide. This is what we did in 2015, vetted 2,000 deals, invested in 20, and there's the Catalyst Fund. We did 3 Catalyst Fund deals. And these are the categories that we invested in. I'm proud to say, and as I said when answering the question back there, we as a company, as a fund, are very, very focused on this strategic element. We know that the best startups, can choose from a variety of funding options, and we want to differentiate ourselves, prove out our worth, so to speak. And we think the best way to do that is to deliver on this promise of strategic support. So last year, actually, 82% of our portfolio companies were, now that's a little bit, I think that's a little bit overblown in that they were engaged in conversation with either Comcast or NBCU, but almost 50% of them had an actual deal with Comcast or NBCU. We talk about our flywheel, which is you do the investment first, then you make the introductions. The idea really is that the better the deal flow, the more opportunity and more interest Comcast and NBC, the mothership, has in working with the portfolio companies, the better we can deliver on the promise. We see those deals, and it's just this wonderful virtuous cycle that seems to be working really well for us. Frankly, it's sort of a win-win-win in that, Comcast and NBC get value from it, just as the startup gets value from it. And of course, we get value from it because our deal flow improves. So this is just to emphasize the fact that it is very much a focus of ours. This is our platform, and it's a pretty broad one. So broad, it's a rare company that we can't support in some ways. So you can see we've got, I don't know how many of you, know the sort of full breadth of Comcast and NBC, but on the Comcast side, of course, we have the cable properties, 23 million cable homes. We've got our fastest growing revenue line is Comcast Business. I think we've got 4 million small and medium-sized businesses that we serve at this point. We have a variety of sports teams as well. On the NBC side, of course, we have the network, the #1 network and the rated network in the country right now. We've got 12 cable networks. We've got the theme parks, and then we've got the studios as well. So it's, if you're in media and ad tech, it's an obvious fit. And we do a lot, of course, in digital video and digital media and ad tech. If you're in consumer, it's also a pretty good fit because we have a pretty powerful promotional and marketing team behind us. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about the... Sorry. Can you share a little bit about the trends that you're seeing for 2016 and the type of companies that you're looking to invest in this year? Like, which verticals are you?
Digital video, of course. VR and AR we're doing more and more on. And on that slide, you could see we started doing some real VR and AR investing last year. We do a lot of SaaS and enterprise. We, like the rest of the world, are interested in AI. I've got 2 or 3 members on the team who are more focused on the sort of cable infrastructure and big data world. That's very much a Comcast cable-driven initiative, although there's an NBCU piece to it as well. I guess that's the best representation. So we did digital home. Last year it was digital home, VR, AR, ad tech, content network, distribution platforms. By that I meant, these are large audience networks that we're interested in distributing our content across. If you don't know YouNow, you should. It's a great property. We're really excited to be in it. So anyway, that's our platform. These are examples of some of these partnerships that I've been talking about that we're really excited about. One is the Accelerate program. So the notion there is, in talking to startups, we were finding that none of them wanted to do television advertising because they didn't think they could afford it and that the ROI wasn't there. And we wanted to sort of prove that out differently. So we put together a program that we're just sort of ramping up now. We've had a couple of people, including Madison Reed and Bubble Bar in the program, and it's worked quite nicely, where we give them a discounted package of advertising across the NBC Comcast platform and help on creating the campaign, et cetera. And the idea is if it does work, which it seems to be, and we can prove out that in fact the ROI is good as anything on Facebook or Google or Yahoo, that they'll come back and be brand advertisers on television, which again is a perfect example of how that kind of support, the portfolio company wins and the larger company wins as well. So that one, as I said, we're just ramping up, but so far the early signs are really good and we're seeing success and we're really excited about it. On the cable side of the house, well, first of all, you've got on the corporate side of the house. So enterprise is a category that we invest in as well because why? We're a large customer. So when we first invested in DocuSign, we were their largest customer. I don't know that we're their largest customer anymore. And I think they were really quite happy with that. Edge Connects is a data hosting, edge data hosting provider. Frankly, that one you should keep your eyes on because I think that's going to be a really big business as well. That one was primarily, dreamt up with Comcast. It was a need that we had as a company. They were a company that, could support that need. We invested, we were their first customers, and off to the races they go. So that's a really good example of what we're talking about as well. Quickly, CTI Towers, frankly, that's when we incubated in-house. We looked around our assets, our platform, had a bunch of wireless towers that we weren't really using. We said, let's package them up and make a tower company out of them. And we had a really successful exit on that one just last year. That's a little bit sort of off to the side, but it's a nice example as well. You guys, I think at this point know we invested in Vox Media very early on in one of their earliest rounds. Of course, made the introductions to NBC, and NBC came in and led the last round with a large investment, and now owns a significant piece of Vox. And there's huge synergies at work and being worked on across those two companies as well.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Isa, and I was just wondering, where do you see the future of mobile video?
Where do I see the future of mobile video? I think it has a huge future. I think that it's pretty clear to us that the way people are consuming content is changing rapidly. And I very much believe that you and I will be both sourcing our content. Actually, I think it's true across the spectrum. I think the way people create content, I think the way they source content and the way they consume content is changing rapidly. I think we will be sourcing from a whole variety of providers. And I think mobile, more and more content will be consumed on mobile devices, especially when you look out internationally. And as a result, I think that people who create content need to keep that in mind because I think that, different content does better on different screens.
And what is your intake from horizontal versus vertical content? Like horizontal content versus horizontal content on mobile video?
Do you mean format-wise?
Yeah, format-wise, yeah.
I don't know that I personally have a preference, but I do think that anybody who is creating content for mobile devices need to be mindful that the format is going to differ, with the experience.
Oh.
Okay?
One more? Thank you. Hello, my
Hi.
name is Susana. I want to ask you, if you have like 10 projects that are very good, but you have to pick only one, what are like the key characteristics or strengths that a project needs to have to win over other ones?
So I think the first three are pretty much the same as I imagine, a first round or a benchmark or a Sequoia or an Excel or an Andreessen, which is, team, product market fit. Is this a team and a product with promise to be a high growth company? So those are very much similar to anybody else's. Then we add that second lens, which is there some way we can help jumpstart that growth with our platform?
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you to Amy from Comcast.